So, there are 5 categories of Scotch whisky, and these were defined in 2009 by the Scotch Whisky Association, the SWA as it's commonly known. And these guys, they protect the laws and reputation of Scotch whisky. But what are the laws? Firstly, it has to be distilled, matured and bottled in Scotland. And it has to be made of 3 ingredients, just water, cereals and yeast. Then it has to be matured in oak barrels no larger than 700 litres. And then when it's bottled, it has to be bottled at a minimum strength of 40% ABV, alcohol by volume, with no additives. There are 2 slight sort of anomalies to this. They can add water to bring it down to the correct bottling strength, and sometimes people do also add E150 caramel colouring, and this is to create consistency of colour within products. If these laws aren't followed, then simply put, it cannot be labelled as Scotch whisky, and the SWA will come after anyone that doesn't follow those rules. So what are the 5 categories of Scotch whisky, I hear you ask? So the first category, single malt, and this means that the whisky has been distilled at one distillery, hence single, and made of 100% malted barley with no other cereals added. Hence the malt parts are single, one distillery, malt made of 100% malted barley. And this is made in batch distillation in copper pot stills. The famous examples that we know, there's Glenfiddich, there's Glenlivet, Macallan, Laphroaig and so on. For this I've picked Glendronach. This is a lovely East Highland distillery up in Aberdeenshire there, and so everything in this bottle has been made at the Glendronach distillery of 100% malted barley. The next category is single grain, and this again is made at one distillery, but this time made from whole grains or other malted or unmalted cereals. And just to add a bit of confusion, it can also include some malted barley, but most of the time these days it's made from wheat. And these are made through the big tall column stills, not the copper pot stills like the single malt, but the column stills. So the wash comes in at the bottom, gets evaporated, and then distilled back to a spirit by the time it comes off the top of the column. So the most well known of this is the Hague Club, and this is the David Beckham whisky in the blue bottle. But we don't have Hague Club, so for this I've got label 5, single grain, and this is made at the Starlaw distillery in Bathgate, just between Glasgow and Edinburgh there. So the third category, which is the largest, contains the most products of any of these categories, is the blended Scotch. So this is a blend of one or more single malts with one or more single grains and from different distilleries. So they tend to use a single grain as a foundation, and then they add single malts on top of this to sort of accentuate flavours and so on. So the famous examples of this, we have Johnny Walker, we have Chivas Regal, Ballantyne's, Grant's, etc. And for this I've picked the Johnny Walker, and it's the blue label in this case. So the biggest selling of any of them, Johnny Walker, outsells any others more than sort of 2 to 1 almost. The fourth category is what's called blended malt, and this is a blend of 2 or more single malts, and they're made at more than one distillery. So a well-known one is Monkey Shoulder. That's the biggest selling, and it's been around for a number of years now. Again, I don't have that, so I've got the lovely Timorous Beastie, which is from Douglas Lang, a lovely family-owned independent bottling company. And so that's our blended malt, all single malts, all from different distilleries. In this case they're actually all from Speyside. The final category is what's called blended grain. So this is again a blend of 2 or more single grains in this case from more than one distillery. And there are very few products actually of single grain, of blended grain. But probably the most well known is a lovely whiskey called Hedonism from Compass Box, the independent, quite artisan whiskey makers. So we don't have a bottle of Hedonism or any other blended grain. So you'll have to bear with us. Just pretend this one is Hedonism. So there we are. There we have it. The 5 categories of Scotch whisky as defined by the Scotch Whisky Association, the SWA 2009. Single malt, single grain, blended Scotch, blended malt, and blended grain.